Oh, God. So, anyway, you asked about the pre show. This was the October 12th Tacoma Dome event. At least they outdrew Spokane.
But every time they said the name of the building, the Tacoma Dome, they would go just outside of Seattle, Tacoma. What? They couldn't just say Tacoma.
We've heard of Tacoma. It's and actually, are you familiar with the SeaTac airport out there, Brian? Have you been through that fine facility?
I think I don't think that's the airport I fly in and out of in Washington. No.
Well, that's because it's the Seattle Tacoma airport. It's right in between, hence SeaTac. They're like Minneapolis, St. Paul, but out in the great Northwest. They're very close together. So it's not a big goddamn deal either way, but Tacoma Dome sounds like Superdome or Silver Dome or Hoosier Dome or one of these other goddamn domes.
Yeah, every time you say just outside of Seattle, it sounds like you couldn't book a building in Seattle.
Yeah, it's like we're really close to a big town.
We're almost there. Troy, New York was almost in New York City if you watch the commercials for New York
fucking
Knockout.
Hell, yeah, almost by about 2.5 hours by the time we got out of that. But nevertheless, the point is, you think Tacoma Dome, but Brian, do you have or can you Google the Tacoma Dome seating capacity, not for the AEW show? But what I'm saying is they have got grandiose with their naming up there, I believe, because when you think of a dome, you're thinking 40, 50,000 seat domed stadium of some kind. And I think they're calling this a dome because the top is round.
According to Wikipedia, capacity, and it appears capacity maybe for basketball, I'm not sure, but capacity is listed as 21,000.
Okay, well, that's pretty big, but I still wouldn't think of that as a dome, would you?
No, dome is usually 50,000 seats or more in my eyes.
Well, yeah, but maybe he's just a little wannabe dome up there. But nevertheless, they didn't have 20,000 people, but they did seem like they had...
They have a dome. I'm looking at pictures. At least, there is a dome on the building. At least they have that going for them.
Does it open, or is it just... But we ought to put a dome over AEW. Remember that show, Under the Dome?
You remember the movie Biodome?
Well, actually, but that had a resolution. Remember, I've talked about this before. The goddamn series went off the air before they found out why this invisible fucking dome was over the goddamn top of everything. But nevertheless, how many people did they have at this fiasco that sat and witnessed this?
According to WrestleTix, tickets distributed 8,045.
So, boom. That is, 8, 16, 12. That's 40% of a fucking house there. That's better than they've been doing.
And by the way, for the record, last year's WrestleDream at the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle, Washington.
The Climate Pledge Arena?
6,771 tickets. So they're up.
They were up.
Just outside of Seattle. That's the secret. Don't go into Seattle.
Yeah, fucking forget. But Spokane, you can go too far because Spokane, there was 1,800 people. So you can go too far. And just like this show did. But anyway, where I was going with this was that they were in the Washington states. Therefore, they're on the West Coast time zone, Pacific time, as they say. So you can say, well, this show was 5.5 hours fucking long. But they started early out there because it was only 5 o'clock Pacific time. But that still means people had to leave their homes and go to this building and get in and get set down. And you saw when the pre-show came on, there wasn't a lot of them set down yet. But for those people, and then you got 4 more hours of show after the show until the show's, and then you got to get out of there. What the fuck? And how much of this can you look at when it's all the same flavor? How long is it going to take them to pull out a table? But nevertheless, it's an endurance test, isn't it? Even if you like wrestling, how much wrestling can you fucking watch?
WWE has kind of mastered it right now and spoiled us because it's so tolerable. The pay-per-view where you get 4 matches, 5 matches, maybe 6 And they even throw commercials in now. And it's acceptable. 15 minutes in between matches. And somehow that's more tolerable than nonstop. Let's go to the next match. This will go for 25 minutes. They're going to do everything. Next match, 2 out of 3 falls. Let's go even longer. I mean, just nonstop.
By the time they finish beating that dead horse, poor old Aubrey Ed's running around trying to find a place to hide from these dead horse beaters.
Hey, quick question. Based on the crowd size and the crowd reaction to a lot of the things on this show, or the lack of reaction, how much of this crowd do you think were there because of the idea that the local guy, Bryan Danielson, may be retiring? This may be his last match.
Well, clearly he was the most over guy on the show and who they were invested in. And even after all of that, they may have been saving themselves earlier in the night because they were looking like, how much longer must this bullshit go on, as Dusty would say, so that they could actually still cheer for Bryan without needing oxygen. But that's the thing, is in a lot of cases, this audience now is distilling down. And yes, they had more people in the building than they normally do, but this is a pay-per-view, so I would assume there was some traveling contingent to it, and the really dedicated folks that want to be there and following most everything. So they are coming to see a couple of individual personalities and then the mayhem spots. The fucking, oh shit, they've just killed themselves, or the cool, he did a triple Lindy and landed on his feet with his hands outstretched in the form of a fucking swan or whatever. I don't know. But they don't care who's doing them, because they will pop for those in any match, but otherwise the rest of the match, or many of the matches, they're sitting there, or they're looking at their phones, or they're watching it like they're waiting for the next fucking car to come down sideways down the interstate and crash into something. Otherwise, they're just watching the cars go by. So I think that's what it is. It's the individual people. They want to see Bryan Danielson. They want to see Ospreay. They want to see MJF whenever they can see MJF. And then they want to see people attempt to fucking murder themselves in something they believe is a shoot by crashing through shit that doesn't work with them. Does that make any sense?
We haven't even begun the pre-show, but yeah, that makes plenty of sense.
Anyway, speaking of the pre-show, the reason I watched the pre-show was because I heard of my old friend, and we'll get to it in a second, is going to be on it. I said, oh my gosh, I got to see what the fuck, right? So the thing is, I recorded on my cable system, which, as we've already talked about, is flawed since it's from Spectrum, but it's like 3 30-minute countdown shows before the pay-per-view on the pay-per-view channel. So you got to record each countdown show individually, but it's an hour and a half long, but they've got it listed in 30-minute increments, just countdown. Not even about what it is. So you would never know, unless you were trying to find it, that it was AEW programming. What does yours say?
Mine says nothing. Like it's almost impossible to buy the pay-per-view or order it. And I used to use Bleacher Report. That's done now. I'm not using Triller, because I hate the name to begin with. But I bought it on pay-per-view. Well, I bought it on pay-per-view, and I had to find the channel, which on Xfinity is 504. And then the two options were watch or watch and record, or purchase or purchase and record. And I did that, which recorded a 12-hour block for no good reason.
Yes, yeah. Well, but also mine, if you hit purchase and record, it won't work. You got to buy it, and then you got to go back and fucking record it separately. I found that out the hard way. Well, that's been the pre-show. No, so anyway, Renee Moxley Good hosts the pre-show along with Jeff Jarrett and RJ City. And at the top of the thing, as I'm zipping through trying to find out when they're going to start these matches, they had Muffin Top Taylor sitting out there talking. He's still employed by this organization. He's like the Wally's boring friend that got cut from the final version of Leave It to Beaver. Why do they put this fucking guy with that face on television?
I didn't see any of that. I saw the stuff with Jeff and Renee and RJ. I didn't get to see the Chuck Taylor appearance, I guess, early in the pre-show, really early in the pre-show.
Yes. Yeah, I was on fast forward and suddenly that face jumped out at me and I said, oh, gee. Anyway, so they did 15 minutes of pay-per-view pitching and selling and whatever, and then they started the matches of the pre-shows. You get an hour and the people in the building, if they were in the building, got an hour and 15 minutes of wrestling before the wrestling started. And Brian Cage wrestled Atlantis Jr. I did not do a critique on some diminutive gymnast wrestling a giant bodybuilder who imagines himself a diminutive gymnast. But they hired the fucking male models from the WWE. The ones that LA Knight escaped and got, what was he, Max Dupree or whatever the fuck? Did you see the male models?
I did see this. I knew they were there because we saw them on one of their other shows. And
oh, that's right.
It's interesting to me they left WWE and said, hey, can we find a way to keep that gimmick? That's the last thing I would have said.
It's like jumping out of a fucking burning building and then setting yourself on fire.
LA Knight ran as far as he could from that gimmick. These guys are leaning in still. They're not even there anymore. They're leaning into the gimmick.
And the M&M collection, that sounds like a candy kiosk at the mall. What is But that's why I watched, because they're doing this promo and it's a rotten fucking gimmick, right? But they brought out Rico. Did you see the big reveal on the promo?
I did. Now, did you know about this beforehand?
No.
Oh, because the way you said it was I had to watch it to see this, so I didn't know.
Well, no.
I was shocked when all of a sudden he popped up there.
When I was recording the pay-per-view, I also recorded the pre-show because you never know when somebody's going to meet their untimely end in one of these things. So I wanted to make sure I had all my bases covered. And then I heard about it afterwards, so I actually watched it. Otherwise, I wasn't going to watch unless there was at least some type of, multi-fucking alarm fire or ambulances descending or whatever.
Before you say anything, just a quick recap for fans that may be younger. Rico Constantino was a top star in OVW.
Yes.
Despite the fact that he was older and started late, had a world of talent, and WWE brought him up to the main roster and made him, was he a hairdresser? It was an effeminate manager.
He was Billy and Chuck's hairstylist.
That's what it was.
And with an homage to Adrian Street thrown in there, because he was like, well, if they want me to do it, I'm going to do it.
And when they did the big angle where Billy was going to marry Chuck.
Yes.
With Eric Bischoff as the minister wearing a disguise. Yes, this aired on TV. He was their guy. Rico was their best man, or what? I don't know what he was, but
yes, well,
that was the last time we saw him, I guess is the point.
He was the better man. Yeah, and also here was the thing, is Billy referenced it when they were doing the promo earlier in this deal, or before the match, saying, you know what, I know you. You're the one that almost talked me into marrying a guy. And the people sitting there, because it's been 25 years ago, the people sitting there maybe have been going, what the fuck is going on around here?
I missed that episode of Collision.
But nevertheless, but Rico, and he's my age, by the way, and still looks like that.
Really?
Because that was the issue when we got him in, was it late 1999, early 2000 in OVW? He was like 38 years old at that time.
He was on the very first ever episode, and maybe the pilot episode of American Gladiators.
Yes.
He was the competitor.
And he's one of like a handful of the competitors that actually they won. And that was the thing, is that we told everybody that he was like 10 years younger than he was, and they still said, oh man, he looks great for his age. he was just a genetic freak. But that was one of the knocks that Danny Davis and I even went to sit down with Stephanie at one of the SmackDowns they did here in Louisville and plead his case because he was not only an exemplary employee and a tremendous human being, but he excelled at being a babyface. He was a gymnast. He was a bodybuilder. He was a fitness freak. He could do all the flying shit as a babyface, and then tore his ACL when he came back. We switched him heel, and he was a great fucking heel. And he could do a promo. And his background, he had been a firefighter in Las Vegas, and a police officer and a firefighter / EMT fellow. He'd been shot 3 times, stabbed twice, hit by 2 cars in the line of duty. And we said all this true shit on TV here. People fucking loved him. And they wanted to cut him. He's too old. I said, look at him. Jesus H. Christ. And then, and finally, they brought him up there and made him the ambiguously gay hairstylist for poor Billy Gunn and his partner, Chuck, what was his name? Columbo?
Chuck Palumbo.
That's not
Columbo.
Well, that's not what Peter Falk said, but anyway.
Fuck you.
But yeah, so they brought out Rico, and he's going to be the third man in the corner. So
on the pre-show with no prior announcement or any, I mean, not that it would be a big like, pop for, oh my God, I got to tune in to see Rico, but just such a random thing to do.
Well, but we'll get to why it was stupid booking wise here in a second when the match comes up. But I'm sure you watched, Brian, the ladies contest on the pre-show program with Harley Cameron versus your friend and hers, Anna Jay.
I did indeed watch this match. I wanted to make sure I knew what was happening with the grappling.
What was happening with the grappling? Well, what was up with the referee shoving?
You saw that? I didn't know if you saw enough to see that. Okay.
Oh no, this went viral. My Twitter was just full of it. Where, I mean, we didn't expect this was going to be, Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk Jr. to begin with, right? But nevertheless, for those of you who didn't hear about this, I encourage you to seek out the brief clip that's on the internet. Anna Jay gives Harley Cameron some kind of, it looked nasty, a fucking backwards face plant where she threw her over her back and fucking planted her in the goddamn mat. And when she covered her, she had her wound up so fucking tight. And I've been there a couple times. One time when the principal of the Morristown, Tennessee East High School fucking covered me with his goddamn elbow in my Adam's apple. But she had her cinched up, and Harley Cameron's left shoulder was nowhere near down on the mat. So as the referee goes down to count, he reaches over and he pushes her shoulder down to the mat and then counts 1, 2, 3. I mean, we've seen some of the referee bobbles and things that, who was it that shoved the guy's leg the other week? But goddamn it, you're right there at next to a person's head. Can you not say, hey, put your fucking shoulder down? Do you have to actually visually in front of the whole place push it down to the mat? Or had he said that and she didn't know what the fuck that he was talking about?
Before you even get to the referee, based on what a wrestler is supposed to do, is this on Harley Cameron? I mean, how do you end up in that position where your shoulder is so clearly not even close to the mat that the referee has to do that?
Well, in all honesty, as I said, had she had her fucking face planted for real? Was she cognizant at that point? Was she cinched up too tight where she couldn't put it down? Well, no, because when the referee pushed it, she put it right down. So She was just probably concentrating on, okay, I lived through that thing, and now she's got my legs, and she wasn't paying attention to her shoulders. How many matches have either one of these people had? But still, you would think that you would notice something like that, but I don't. I don't.
Anna Jay looked good.
You mean her?
They should
her
put the belt on
wrestling
her.
or
No, they
her-
should put the belt on her. They should have her be the one to go over Moxley.
Oh, the men's belt.
Yeah, any belt, yeah. I think it would get people talking, get people watching, and more Anna Jay.
Maybe if she won it, but that's the only thing she was allowed to wear, is what you're saying.
No, I let her go out there like a professional. I'm not a pervert or a nudist or whatever you are over there.
It's a naturalist.
A naturalist.
Yes.
I'm willing to appreciate her work
Nature.
with clothing on, yeah.
Well, no, clothing is the work of the devil, see? We should only have things that exist in nature.
She's been in AEW a long time and she's still young. I always say it. She's one of those ones I wish WWE would be able to get her into NXT because I think she seems to want to get better. And I think if she was finally in a better system, it would really happen. Harley Cameron is no hope for at all.
Boy, that's tough, isn't it? That one's tough. It's like, poor Dave Cameron.
She has nothing to do. Will you stop doing that? She has nothing to do with wrestling historian Dave Cameron.
I thought that, she's from New Zealand over there. I thought that, it's a small island.
Whenever I'm going through my files, every now and then I just find a random photo. I'm like, who is this? It's always Dave Cameron. And it's always like, wow. It's literally like Dave Cameron at George Hackenschmidt's house in England.
Yeah.
With him, with George Hackenschmidt. I'm like, what the fuck?
Yes. They were close. It could be that maybe that's why Dave didn't claim Harley, because maybe Hackenschmidt was behind it.
That must suck if you are like forget about a wrestling legend, a wrestling historian, someone who really loves wrestling, and your kid gets into wrestling and they suck. Right? How do you deal with that? Like, oh, fuck. Like, I know he's not good, or she's not good in this case for this fantasy story of wrestling Lothario Dave Cameron impregnated women.
Do you think that Leo Burke was a disappointment to Tom Burke?
No, come on now. There's no relation there. Was Tom Burke a disappointment to Mildred Burke?
Well, actually, Mildred said that Tom was the best she ever had.
Oh, stop it now.
That's why she left Billy Wolf.
You've gone too far now.
All right, we're just friends of ours, ladies and gentlemen, that we want to entertain. So anyway, the match was up then. The M&M collection with Rico Constantino in the corner against the Acclaimed. Oh, how the Acclaimed have lost their acclaim. Now they're on the pre-show, and remember when they were hot and good and yeah.
Who are they going to bring in next to confront Billy Gunn? You think Bart Gunn's available? Like, who are they going to bring in next from 30 years ago to confront Billy Gunn? On the pre-show.
Actually, Honky Tonk. Remember? Rockabilly, Honky Tonk.
That's good, yeah.
And Honky Tonk is only, I think, 8 years older than Rico. But look, but Rico comes in, he's bigger than half the fucking roster. He's still got the fucking chest, blah, blah, blah. But boy, howdy, the problem was Rico wasn't working in the match. When he interfered, I got a little tickle out of it because, again, as I said, Rico was an exemplary human being during his time here. But, the model gimmick isn't it embarrassing even for this company? And do you think that they think that because it's so bad WWE-ish that it will get heat from this audience, not realizing that's probably not the best kind of the heat?
Yeah, this is actually literally one of the last Vince McMahon gimmicks, and now it's on AEW TV. When Vince was losing it and producing the worst television of his life and coming up with bad idea after bad idea, this was one of his ideas, and now it's on AEW TV. AEW's pre-show, excuse me.
Yeah, and
this is a selling point for the pay-per-view.
And as I mentioned earlier, they had done the promo right before they started the match where Billy Gunn got the microphone and said, "Hey, we've got our history or whatever." However, they went into it saying, "You're the one that almost talked me into marrying a guy." And there's people in the crowd that's not as old as when that happened. And it's not like that's been replayed over and over on these modern retrospectives, has it?
No, they've like run.
Is that one of the things that doesn't age well in today's environment?
The tag team that pretended they were gay so they could stage a wedding. And during the wedding, remember, they announced that they weren't gay.
Yeah.
Where was it going to go if they, I mean, again, there's no good logical end to any of this.
And what they came up with was they were doing it for publicity because of something or other.
Yeah,
the other thing.
They were doing it for publicity. I don't remember why Eric Bischoff was wearing like a wax mask as the priest. What was the reason for him hiding?
He was auditioning for the Vincent Price role in a remake of House of Wax.
Was he behind it? Was that what it was? Was Bischoff as GM or something behind?
Well, I don't know because they don't replay it anymore because every anti-homophobic organization out there would bombard them at this point in time. When's the last time you saw any of that?
He says, "You're the reason I almost married a guy once." If you're in the crowd, you turn to the person next to you like, "What? What did I miss? How did that happen? You're the reason. What did he do?"
But you know what? Once again, maybe because they're the smartest of the smart fans, the diest of the diehards, or the hardest of the, well, I can't say that. They're the ones that'll know if anybody does, the AEW audience, right? But it got more of a than a wow type of thing going on.
Any thoughts on the match?
No. Actually, here's the thing. They all went to the floor so Rico could be in the ring and Billy could come up behind him and they have their, face off. And Rico goes for his spin kick, which he had done when he interfered earlier on one of the other guys. And Billy blocks it and gives him the boot and the fame-asser boom. And out goes Rico, and then the Acclaimed beat one of the models 1, 2, 3. But that's the thing, as I was referenced earlier, they not only debuted a new manager, I'm sure it's probably a one-off, but a new manager for this team on a pre-show of a pay-per-view that has the smallest possible audience, but then he gets laid out and they lose the match. So what the... Oh,
he sold that fame-asser good. He took it perfect and he sold it great.
Well, he's an OVW protege, trained by Danny Davis and Rip Rogers and all of the various folks that we had here at the time and overseen and managated by yours truly.
Does he live up there?
No, he went back to Las Vegas and he still went back to be, I don't think he's been an actual city policeman. I think he's in private security and blah, blah, blah. He once bodyguarded Benny Hinn.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
Did he need bodyguard? Were people trying to get to Benny Hinn?
Well, I'm sure somebody smartened up eventually, but no, because Benny Hinn moved in the big circles and needed somebody to clear, just pathways and just make sure.
So maybe this isn't a one-off. Tony is more than willing to fly people around the country to appear on the pre-show. How much is Tony going to offer Rick Martel to appear with these guys?
Maybe they could make him the king of the pre-show. Though he signs a contract to just do the pay-per-view pre-shows.
Before we move on from this real quick, if he had gone up to the main roster at the time where he did, as the Rico from OVW, what do you think his ceiling was? How far do you think he could have gone? What could he have done at that time?
Honestly, as a babyface, he was almost too nice for that era, but he was very athletic and flashy and good looking, so he worked as a territory babyface. But when he switched heel and became the role model, and we played on the fact that he was so fucking perfect and that he had done everything, it was a genetic marvel, and et cetera, and he became snotty about it. That was there was a little bit of what Kurt Angle was doing a fucking year later or whatever in that. And but it's as old as the hills in, wrestling heel presenting, is that you either accept, if a guy's horribly ugly, then play on that, or if he's too good to be true, makes that the Lex Luger, the total package, make something out of that. So I think Rico, he wasn't going to be, the WWF champion and main event pay-per-view, but I could sit here and go down a list of the people they employed over the years 2000 through 2005 and probably find 30 or 40 at least that he could have not only outperformed, but also been a better quality employee than. Just my personal opinion.
Well, that wasn't the highlight of the
show. No. Because then, Brian, I had completely forgotten where WrestleDream came from, what the meaning, the heart and soul behind WrestleDream. Well, I'd forgotten that it was all a tribute from Antonio Kanoki to Antonio Inoki. Since they did it last year, and I thought they might have the good sense to leave it alone at this point, but no, they returned this year, and Tony came out, and
he's a social moron. You know what I mean? He has no idea how to be.
But he was he was hopping. Well, first he was looking out at the people, and he was kind of not really hopping, but just kind of vibrating a bit back and forth. And then he began screaming. And it wasn't like that they were doing the Dominic Mysterio thing where every time he opens his mouth, they're trying to make noise and drown him out. They were already half-ass listening, right? I don't want to scream like he screamed. I can't do it. I would hurt myself.
Thank you, Tacoma, everyone. And he's holding the mic. It's not like he's screaming with no mic.
No, he's screaming into the mic.
While these two very calm children next to him are just standing there.
Well, no, wait a minute. First, he came out first and started screaming, and then he brought them out to scream at them while not looking at them. He was neither blinking nor looking at the two people. He said the grandchildren, the grandsons of Antonio Inoki. And now I started to think, as they walk out next to him and they got the red towels around the neck, and he's giving their names, and I truthfully didn't write their first names down, not disrespecting these teenage young men. But the point is, Tony is screaming their names, but he's not looking at them, and they're 2 feet to the left of him. I'm thinking, is he reading the names from behind the camera? But then the whole time that he was screaming at the fans, he never looked at these kids once. Did you notice that?
I did notice that. He also called Antonio Inoki wrestling's greatest dreamer.
Yes.
Like when he dreamed of taking New Japan's profits and diverting them to other interests that he had.
And that sugarcane plant or farm in Brazil. But he dreamed up a lot of creative accounting. But no, so...
I also want to honor Hiroshi Shinma, wrestling's greatest scapegoat.
That's where they got the gimmick from.
Yeah, from Shinma.
You know what? At that point, the grandkids should have just grabbed the microphone and said, Honorable Master Shinma was innocent. It was Sayama all along.
Sayama? Really? Not Sakaguchi, but it's a total swerve. It's Tiger Mask.
It was Sayama. It was all his fault. See, once again, we talk about them narrowcasting, but then, folks, this is the only way that Brian and I can make it entertaining for ourselves.
They should have had Maeda run out there and shoot kick both of the kids. Start a new feud.
Face in.
Yeah.
But no, Tony comes out. He screams at the people. He brings out the two grandsons of Antonio Inoki, screams their names. He's neither blinking nor looking at these two people that are right next to him. And then he says, to in honor of Antonio Inoki, wrestling greatest dreamer, the whole big thing, he's screaming, we want everybody to let's do Antonio Inoki's famous chant. And when he said that, I swear to God, the place was so quiet, I could hear a black hole turning in outer space. Nobody knew what the fuck to do. It's been 40 years, right? The New Japan tapes.
And never in America was that chant over.
No, and so, but then they've anticipated that. They may not have anticipated the dead silence. Maybe they thought people are going to go, yes, let's all join in doing this thing that you're going to hopefully tell us how to do. So then they put it up on the screen. And Tony Khan Tony Schiavone, I'm sorry, too, is standing there who's introduced this whole thing.
He's there to help Tony Khan lead this chant.
Tony Schiavone tries to read it for the people, but it's up there fairly quickly, so Tony's a beat behind, and it's in Japanese. So for people who have never, one would think, heard it or seen it written or whatever, one time may not be enough. What is it? Nichi Isenda?
Ichi ni Sanda.
Okay, and people are thinking Nissan, Toyota, what? But Ichi ni Senda. But it goes by on the screen one time, and Tony Schiavone reads it, and then this is one of the most awkward segments I've ever seen. Tony Khan says, "That's right, one more time," and it's off the screen, and they've gone back to a graphic, and the people are like, "Oh, wait a minute, what are we supposed to do?" They started to get with it at the end when they realized that they could read it, right? So he calls for it again. It's not there. And he's saying one more time to Tony, like, can you help? And just then it pops back up. And then Tony's ahead of everybody doing it because he's just all amped up.
Everybody doing it. No one was doing it. No one knew the chant. He's standing the famous chant. I mean, when he said, let's all do his famous chant, I said to myself, there's no way anyone here is going to know what that is. This could be really awkward. And then it was even more awkward because it was him and Schiavone leading it and no one doing it.
Tony was even ahead of Tony Schiavone. Tony Khan was when he did it, and then Tony Khan thanked everybody, and people walked away that were on the stage, and some of them may have walked out of the arena as well, but awkward.
In Japanese, Inoki's grandchildren said, "What the fuck?"
Yeah,
it's the last time I do this shit. My grandfather would have walked out.
And one kid looked like he was fucking 16 years. How long has Inoki been gone now? I guess it's only a few years.
Only a few years, but I don't remember how old his children were. He had remember there was Simon Inoki. Inoki wasn't his real name, but he was the son-in-law.
Yeah, I was going to say he was by marriage related.
So are those Simon Inoki's kids? I guess that's what it could be.
Well, at least that way, maybe he didn't have to fly them all the way in from Japan. He could have just brought them up from Los Angeles.
Let's all do his famous chant. Oh, that's one of the greatest phrases ever for something no one knew what he was going to do. And Schiavone, noted New Japan expert Schiavone, was going to help him lead the chant.
Yeah, he's going to help him because he was probably reading it for the first time. But it was like if somebody had come out there with the microphone and said, "Okay, everybody in the crowd, let's now chant Socrates' theory in ancient Greek."
I thought this segment was so amazing. I was dumbfounded. And I said, there's no way Jim watched a pre-show. I need to find it. Couldn't find it anywhere on YouTube. Because I was going to send you the link. This is a must-see segment. Tony Khan has no idea how to behave in public or how to use a microphone. And then the chant part with Schiavone is one of the most awkward moments in the history of wrestling television. And this is still just the pre-show. This is just the pre-show.
It's like if you had two Abbotts and no Costello. It was very strange. But, well, and then the pre-show then concluded with an 8 or 10 man tag team match. I don't know. The entertainment value was out of it for me at that point. So, but did I miss anything, or did everybody walk out unscathed? I mean,
I didn't really watch too much of the match. I saw the finish. The fans there seemed to be into the Outrunners, so they have that going for them. But other than that, I was using the famous catchphrase of Gorilla Monsoon, "Go home." Go home. And we're ready for the main show.
Memphis TV, they used to send Guy Coffey out. He'd walk out the door and he'd stand behind one of the two fucking studio cameras and he would flip his tie, right? And finally, after long enough, the people got smart to it. They'd see him walk out there. Now go on back, Mr. Coffey, and let him wrestle.